Good evening from New York. President Obama met at the White House this afternoon with 20 top officials representing the entire American security and intelligence apparatus. The meeting's goal to assess how a 23-year-old Nigerian Muslim could bring a bomb on board a U.S.-bound plane in Yemen carrying a U.S. visa, even though American officials knew his father feared he had become radicalized, even though American officials knew al-Qaeda's offshoot in Yemen was preparing some Nigerian man for an attack on America. The president emerged from today's meeting not happy. Early this evening, Mr. Obama declared flatly the system had failed. He said the U.S. had all the intelligence it needed to prevent Umar Abdulmuttalib from getting on a jet headed for this country, but that the intel was not fully analyzed nor leveraged. That, he said, is not acceptable and will not be tolerated. During the closed-door meeting, according to the White House, Mr. Obama went further and said, quote, "This was a screw-up that could have been disastrous. We dodged a bullet, but just barely. It was averted by brave individuals, not because the system worked, and that is not acceptable. While there will be a tendency for finger-pointing, I will not tolerate it." He was briefed by FBI Director Robert Mueller on the bombing attempt investigation, briefed by Attorney General Eric Holder on the state of the prosecution, expected to begin this month, briefed by Homeland Security Secretary Napolitano on the review of airport screening measures, and briefed by counterterrorism advisor John Brennan on the review of U.S. terror watch lists and how the intelligence on this case was handled or mishandled. But Mr. Obama did not identify who screwed up, nor did he say whether anything will happen to them.
The U.S. government had sufficient information to have uncovered this plot and potentially disrupt the Christmas Day attack. But our intelligence community failed to connect those dots, which would have placed the suspect on the no-fly list. In other words, this was not a failure to collect intelligence. It was a failure to integrate and understand the intelligence that we already had. The information was there. Agencies and analysts who needed it had access to it, and our professionals were trained to look for it and to bring it all together. Now, I will accept that intelligence by its nature is imperfect, but it is increasingly clear that intelligence was not fully analyzed or fully leveraged. That's not acceptable, and I will not tolerate it.
On the same day, his spokesman confirmed that the suspect was given or has given the FBI actionable intelligence. Mr. Obama said today that prior U.S. intelligence on the figure previously known as the Nigerian included the fact that he was planning an attack specifically on the U.S. But Mr. Obama also revealed something about the role of Guantanamo Bay in all of this. While former Vice President Cheney has argued the failed attack shows that Gitmo should not be closed, we already knew that two leaders of the group behind this attack, al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, were allowed to create the organization precisely because Mr. Cheney and Mr. Bush set them free from Guantanamo. But today, Mr. Obama said that Guantanamo will, in fact, still be closed because, in part, its very existence, its creation, contributed to last month's attempted attack.
Make no mistake, we will close Guantanamo Prison, which has damaged our national security interests and become a tremendous recruiting tool for al-Qaeda. In fact, that was an explicit rationale for the formation of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula.
Approximately half of the 198 detainees still at Guantanamo are Yemenis. None of them will be sent back for now, Mr. Obama said. After several years in which the Bush-Cheney administration allowed al-Qaeda to take root there, that impoverished nation has only in the past year begun to get serious about al-Qaeda, with multiple strikes prior to Christmas and thousands of Yemeni troops battling al-Qaeda just this week. Yemen reporting the death of two al-Qaeda members connected to those threats that had led the U.S. to close its embassy there, and that embassy reopening today. With us again tonight, MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff, also author of Renegade, The Making of a President. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
Last night on this program, you reported the White House investigation includes, among many things, addressing whether somebody had critical information but did not pass it on, perhaps intentionally. Can you explain some more clear nature of the scenario they might have been looking at and why it remained on the radar?
Yeah, well, for a start, the president effectively closed the door to much of this inquiry today by calling it, in the White House, telling everyone he called it a giant screw-up. In that sense, it's closer to the cock-up rather than the conspiracy I talked about. And by the way, let me just clarify, when I mentioned conspiracy or cock-up yesterday, I wasn't talking about, as some online commentators have interpreted it, a political plot to embarrass the president by allowing civilians to die. This really gets to the heart of intent versus pure accident. And And intent can be non-malicious. It can be a failure to cooperate. It can be a lack of confidence in the system, which the president has also concluded that's where he's at. And one thing that the president didn't refer to today, which was very revealing, was what he picked out, first of all, in Hawaii. The story about Abdul Muttalib's father going to the CIA in Nigeria and telling them about the radicalization of his son and the fears about his son. That information in the early reports was not shared. The president confirmed that it wasn't shared. The CIA and other reports compiled a dossier on Abdul Muttalib, which was not also apparently shared. He doesn't want this blame game anymore. The president understands that that can be corrosive. He wants to look at the how things can be fixed rather than the why they were broken in this case.
Lack of confidence in the system and the response to it being don't put the information into the system. It sounds like something we had in football the other day, the player who refused to play, so the team announced it was benching him. How do you protect the value of the intelligence or the value of your own intelligence networks by not putting the information into a system, no matter how broken that system might be?
Well, ultimately, you don't actually protect the value, of course, because other people cannot act on it, and intelligence that cannot be acted on is not actually useful in terms of disrupting these plots. So if you stand back and look at it like that, and look at it from the end point, of course, it doesn't make any sense. But this is a system that the administration has inherited. And look, the way they're talking about it tells you a lot. You would not have heard President Bush saying that the edifice established after 9/11 could be this faulty and this prone to error, and also to this lack of cooperation, which gets you to a totally dysfunctional system as we saw it over Christmas.
To the on-the-record stuff from today, what else do we know about today's meeting?
Well, some classic Obama positions here. He goes around the table asking people to blame themselves. So it's a blame game on your own house. And they seem to think that that's effective. Clearly, the president has increased the pressure on everyone. We in the media, of course, love the blame game. It is insightful for us. It's a great story. But the president made it very clear that this is going to be about moving forward, not looking back.
But Mr. Obama said in that public statement early this evening, that there will be accountability but no finger pointing. How do you know who to hold accountable if nobody's pointing out who they are, the finger or otherwise? And the White House said that all the relevant agencies took responsibility, much as you said there. But how do you take real responsibility if you're not doing so in public but rather in private?
You don't, and this is the same set of problems that the Bush administration faced. How open can you be? Here you have a president who is admitting fault. He doesn't obviously mind, as President Bush would have minded, that the terrorists find out all sorts of spots of weakness here. The weaknesses are exposed because this guy broke through every piece of system and all the intelligence was out there. I think that what we're going to see, typically for this administration, is that changes are made over time. People are eased out and there will be shakeouts, but it won't be one big fell swoop, one big structural overhaul.
MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff, also author of the book Renegade: The Making of a President. As always, thanks for your time tonight, Richard.
Thank you, Keith.